Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. The rain had begun long before dusk fell. It wasn't a storm. Not a crash of thunder or burst of lightning. No. It was the kind of rain that whispered. Persistent, delicate, like it had always been raining and would never stop. A fine mist clung to the earth and smeared the outline of every tree, every crooked signpost, until even the road beneath one's boots seemed only half real. The traveler pulled their coat tighter, breath curling in the damp air like smoke from an invisible fire. The road ahead twisted through a forest of skeletal birch trees, their white bark glowing faintly in the twilight, like bones half buried in shallow graves. No bird sang. No wind stirred the leaves. The silence was absolute. They had been walking for hours. The last village, a nameless scattering of thatched roofs and shuttered windows, had faded behind them just before noon. The locals had said very little. Most had simply stared. But one old man, hunched over a cane carved from a deer's antler, had muttered something as the traveler passed. "Don't stray from the road." Not once. Simple words. Ominous in their honesty. The traveler had nodded politely but hadn't replied. These backcountry folk were always filled with superstitions. Every town had its ghosts. Still, something about the air had changed once they entered the forest. As if the land itself was holding its breath. Twilight deepened, and the mist thickened. Shadows stretched longer than they should have, curling in the corners of vision, never quite staying still. The traveler adjusted their pack and quickened their pace. They had heard of Wraithmoor, an old village deep in the moorlands, where the fog rolled in from the sea and never quite rolled back out. It was not on most maps. Just a whisper of a place. A place people left. But seldom returned from. An hour passed. Maybe two. The road narrowed, barely more than a muddy trail now, lined by withered fences and toppled stones. A broken milestone marked WRATHMOR, 2 miles, leaned at a drunken angle. It was then the traveler noticed the silence had changed. Before, it had been merely absence. Now it was a presence in itself, heavy, watching, alive. The feeling that someone, or something, was matching their pace just behind them, out of sight. They turned. No one. Yet the mist shifted, as if it parted for a shape that had just moved away. They swallowed. Kept walking. Up ahead, the forest thinned. The trees grew sparse, and the moorlands began. Low, rolling hills stretched out into nothingness, blanketed in heather and fog. And there, barely visible in the distance, a cluster of roofs. Candlelight in windows. Smoke rising in straight columns from stone chimneys. Wraithmoor. A strange chill brushed the traveler's neck. Then, a sound. A whisper, no louder than the rustle of reeds. It came from behind again. And though it was unintelligible, something in it struck a chord. As if the voice had once known their name. They turned a second time. And once again, nothing. Only fog. Only the road. They didn't look back again. The village of Wraithmoor greeted the traveler not with bustle or warmth, but with silence. The buildings were old, stone and wood bowed by time and weather. Moss crept up the walls like green veins. Every rooftop was draped in a thin sheen of damp, and every window bore the same drawn curtains or warped glass. The only sound was the slow trickle of a nearby stream and the occasional creak of unseen hinges swinging in the windless air. No one stood in the streets. The traveler crossed into the main square. It wasn't much, a worn fountain with a cracked basin, surrounded by low buildings. A pub. A small general store, shuttered. a chapel steeple rising like a crooked finger into the mist. But there was one place still open, the inn. The hollow hearth. The door creaked as the traveler stepped inside. Warmth met them, firelight from a hearth and the faint scent of peat smoke. Inside was dim but clean. A few candles flickered on thick oak tables. One man sat alone at the far end, cloaked in shadow, unmoving. Behind the counter stood the innkeeper, a woman in her 50s, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, face lined by years of fog and quiet. Her eyes flicked to the traveler with unreadable weight. "You're late," she said without smiling. "The fog thickens after sundown." The traveler offered a tired smile. "Got caught in the woods. Is it always so quiet here?" The innkeeper didn't answer immediately. She slid a brass key across the counter. "Rooms upstairs. Second on the left." They took it, the cold metal brushing their palm. "You're not the first to come asking about Wraithmoor," the innkeeper added, voice low. "But you might be the first to ask so close to the solstice." The traveler raised an eyebrow. "Is that a bad time?" "Some say the land breathes different in the longest nights. The fog thickens, yes, but it also listens." She paused. "Strange things happen when the veil thins." The fire snapped. The man in the corner hadn't moved. The traveler said, "I'm not here for ghost stories. I'm looking into the old abbey ruins east of here. I write about forgotten places. Folklore." The innkeeper's lips tightened. "Some things are forgotten for a reason." They thanked her and turned toward the stairs, but she spoke again, softer now. "Don't dream with the window open. Don't listen to the wind after midnight. And if you hear whispering from beneath the floorboards," she trailed off, "pretend you don't." Upstairs, the room was simple but solid. A wooden bed, a wash basin, a small mirror. The fog tapped gently at the windowpane. The traveler lit a single candle and unpacked their bag. They tried to write. A few notes. Sketches of the road. The strange silence. But the pen felt heavy. When they finally lay down, they could still hear the whisper of the innkeeper's words, curling beneath the crackle of the hearth. And sometime during the night, though they wouldn't remember it clearly, they awoke to a sound that wasn't wind or creaking wood. It was soft. Like a voice murmuring just behind the walls. Calling something. Or someone. Morning came slowly in Wraithmoor. There was no dawn, not really. Just a dull light that crept through the thick mist, turning blackness into gray. The traveler opened the window a crack and breathed in cold, damp air. The village below was still deserted. But now and then, a curtain shifted in a window. A door closed quietly across the square. Life moved here, but never in the open. They made their way downstairs. The innkeeper was already tending the fire. She didn't speak, but nodded once. The traveler stepped outside, boots sinking into soft mud. Their breath fogged the air. Across the square stood the chapel, its door ajar. To the left, the path that led into the moors. And behind the inn, the outline of something tall and broken, the ruins of the abbey. The traveler made their way there. The abbey stood like a skeleton of stone, arches and pillars reaching toward a sky they could no longer touch. It had no roof, only moss-covered pews and collapsed walls. Vines strangled what was once the altar. Strange markings lined the edges of the stones, not quite letters, not quite symbols. Etched deep, like scars in skin. They took out their notebook and sketched them. That's when they heard it, the whisper again. Low. Rising from beneath their feet. The traveler knelt, brushed away debris from the center of the floor. There, beneath a loose tile, something glinted. Metal. They pried it loose. A ring. Old, iron, set with a dull black stone. And carved along its band, tenebris tangit primos. Latin. Darkness touches first. They slipped it into their pocket. Behind them, a voice. You shouldn't wear it. The traveler turned sharply. An old man stood in the shadow of the archway. Eyes pale as clouded glass. Clothes rough and torn. I wasn't going to, the traveler said. The man only smiled, toothless. They all say that. He turned, disappearing into the fog before they could ask more. Back at the inn, the traveler studied the ring again. Its stone seemed to drink the light. It was oddly warm in their hand. That night, they didn't sleep. The whispering returned. Louder this time. Words still out of reach, but full of intent. The floorboards trembled faintly. And in the dark, the candle sputtered. As if breath had passed over it. By the fourth day, the traveler no longer questioned the strange rhythm of Wraithmoor. Every day began in fog. Every evening ended in silence. The villagers, when seen, moved quickly and spoke softly. Children were not visible. Bells never rang. But the chapel still stood, and the traveler returned to it. Inside, the rot had grown deeper. A sour, damp smell hung in the air. As they stepped over the threshold, the silence swallowed the sound of their boots. They could feel it, like pressure in the ears. Something was waiting here. They remembered the ring. Still warm, still strange. They wore it now, despite the old man's warning. Perhaps out of curiosity. Perhaps out of something else they didn't yet understand. Their eyes turned to the altar. It was built of a single slab of stone, pitted with age. But behind it, partially hidden by rubble and old cloth, a trapdoor. They hadn't seen it before. They knelt, brushing away the debris. A rusted iron ring sat embedded in the wood. They pulled. It opened with a groan like a wounded animal. A stairway spiraled down into blackness. They lit a lantern. And descended. The air changed after the first few steps. It grew colder, but not with the chill of the earth. It was the cold of absence, of something ancient and forgotten. The steps led to a chamber beneath the church. Stone walls, covered in more of the strange markings. A circle carved into the floor. In its center, a pit. Not deep, but wide enough for a man to crouch inside. And there were scratch marks on the inside walls of it. Deep. Desperate. Old blood still dried in the grooves. The traveler knelt. The whispers were loud here. Still wordless, but pressing now, like a tide behind the walls of the mind. They covered their ears. It didn't help. Then, a voice, a real one, from behind. You shouldn't be here. The innkeeper stood at the bottom of the stairs, holding a small lantern. Her face was pale, drawn tight. I thought you didn't follow guests, the traveler said, half joking. I don't. Not unless they're headed to places where things stay buried for good reason. The traveler stood. What is this place? She didn't step closer. A door. A wound. A mouth. She pointed to the pit. There were those who tried to speak to what lives below. The monks who once kept this place. They listened too long. And then they began to feed it. The traveler's skin prickled. Feed it. First with prayers. Then with sound. Then with blood. A beat passed. The traveler whispered, and now? The innkeeper said nothing. But her eyes glanced at the ring. Is it calling you yet? She asked softly. They didn't answer. But in their mind, the whispering swelled. The traveler didn't sleep that night. The walls of the room seemed to shift in the dark, bulging slightly inward, as though the building were breathing. The ring throbbed faintly on their finger, a slow, steady pulse. At midnight, they rose. Compelled by something they didn't understand, they left the inn and made their way to the back of the village, where old buildings slumped and the fog grew denser, curling in ribbons low to the ground. There, they found a narrow house, long abandoned. Its door hung askew, its windows broken. Inside, the air was stale. Dust covered everything. But the floor bore footprints, fresh. And on the walls, names. Hundreds of them, carved into the plaster. Scratched by fingernails, etched with blades. Some in blocky capitals, others in a looping hand. Old names, new names. Some were familiar, villagers the traveler had glimpsed. Others were names they didn't recognize. Until they saw their own. Etched cleanly into the wall near the hearth, as if it had been there for years. They staggered back, heart racing. A gust of wind passed through the broken window. But it carried no cold. Only a voice. Now you see. The traveler turned, and saw no one. Only a shadow, just for a moment, retreating into the hallway. They followed it. The stairs creaked beneath their feet as they climbed to the second floor. Each step groaned like a dying animal. The hallway was lined with doors. All shut. All wrong. They opened one. A room full of mirrors, all shattered. They opened another. A room full of dolls, every face removed. They opened the last door, and found themselves staring into a room they recognized. Their room. At the inn. Identical. Every detail. The bed. The candle. The open journal on the desk. They walked inside, breath tight. On the journal's page, their handwriting. They hadn't written it. You were always going to return. You were always going to remember. You just forgot when. They backed out, shutting the door. But the hallway was no longer there. Just a spiral staircase, leading down, deeper, into stone and shadow. And the whispers, they were louder now. The staircase curved downward like a coiled serpent, each step slick with moss and dark with time. The traveler had long since lost any sense of direction, only down remained, endless and patient. The walls pulsed softly, like lungs breathing fog. The lantern flickered. At times, they were sure they had stopped walking, but the stairs continued to move beneath their feet. Like the world itself was unfolding in reverse. Then, a doorway. It opened into a vast chamber carved from stone, lit dimly by glowing fungus clinging to the walls. The light was greenish-blue, and it cast everything in a dreamlike, underwater hue. The space was empty. Except for the shapes. They lay still, barely discernible in the gloom. Figures. Lying side by side. Dozens of them. Wrapped in linen. Some rotted. Some fresh. Every face covered in wax. Smooth, featureless masks. Each held a black ring on their finger, identical to the one the traveler now wore. One of the bodies twitched. The traveler staggered back, bumping into a stone plinth in the center of the room. Upon it sat a book. Not bound in leather, but in skin. Its pages curled, soaked through with age and something darker. The ink glimmered like oil. They opened it. Names again. The same ones from the house. Page after page. Some crossed out. Some circled. Some marked with strange runes and stains that looked too much like blood. At the very end, the final page. One word, awake. The traveler blinked. Suddenly, they were lying in bed. Back in the inn. Morning. The candle still burned, almost untouched. The journal still sat on the desk, but the entry was gone. The ring was still on their hand. But the whispers? They were inside now. Beneath thought. Beneath skin. And when they looked in the mirror above the wash basin, for just a fraction of a second, the reflection was smiling. But they weren't. The innkeeper refused to meet the traveler's gaze that day. "I told you not to listen," she said, stirring her tea with a hand that trembled slightly. "I told you not to dream with the window open." "I didn't open it," the traveler whispered. The innkeeper looked up. Her eyes were tired. Then it opened itself. Outside, the fog hung heavier than ever. The square was empty. Even the crows had gone quiet. The chapel bells, silent for generations, now gave off the faintest metallic hum, though no one rang them. "I saw them," the traveler said. "Under the earth. The ones with the masks." The innkeeper was quiet for a long time. "They were the watchers," she said at last. "The ones who came before. Those who listened too closely. Who woke the thing that sleeps." "What is it?" "No one knows." A voice. A hunger. A memory that feeds on memory. It has no name, only a weight. Like gravity in thought. Like drowning in a dream. The traveler nodded slowly. "I think it's using me," they said. "To remember itself." The innkeeper's face darkened. "Then it's too late." A silence settled between them. After a time, she reached below the counter and pulled out an object wrapped in cloth. She handed it to the traveler. Inside, a small blade. Black metal. Unmarked. "If it speaks your name," she said, "don't answer. If it shows you your past, don't believe it. And if it reaches through you, into the waking world, use that. End it. Or at least, cut yourself free." The traveler took the blade. It was heavier than it should have been. And warm. That night, they walked back to the chapel. The sky above was moonless, starless. The fog moved like something breathing. They descended again. And this time, the door beneath the altar was open. The stairs beneath the chapel seemed different now. Wider. Smoother. As if thousands of feet had worn them down through centuries of descent. The traveler held the black-bladed knife close, its weight like a promise in their hand. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were voices. Many. Overlapping. Hissing secrets and memories in languages not spoken on any map. They didn't echo, they slid along the walls, caressing the stone, speaking from inside the traveler's bones. "Come closer. We remember you. We never forgot. You were ours once. Ours still." At the base of the steps was a great door, not made by hands, but formed from root and bone, pulsing slightly like flesh. It opened without touch. Inside, a cathedral of darkness. No torches. No light. But the traveler could see. Somehow. The space defied shape, angles bent inward, columns spiraled into the void, stairways rose and fell in impossible geometries. And at the center, a throne. Not of gold or stone, but of memory. A pile of belongings. Books. Boots. Letters. Tools. Bones. Photographs. Journals. All left behind by the others. And upon it sat something. A shape. Human-like, but incomplete. As if built from shadows that forgot what they were supposed to be. Its face was a blur, eyes like twin eclipses. And it spoke. But not aloud. Directly into the traveler's mind. "You wore the ring. You followed the dream. You belong here, now." The traveler gripped the blade tighter. "You sought truth. This is all there is." It stood, and its form shifted. For a moment, it looked like the traveler themselves. Then the innkeeper. Then the old man. Then 1,000 strangers at once. You forgot the pact. But you remembered the path. It raised a hand. The ground split open. From beneath rose the watchers, the linen-wrapped, wax-faced sleepers. Their bodies moved in jerks, but their heads turned slowly, together. Every one of them staring. The traveler stepped forward. The blade sang. The voices howled in protest. You cannot cut memory. You are already part of it. But the blade, forged from silence, carried by the forgotten, was not of memory. It was of unmaking. And with a single stroke, the traveler plunged it into the heart of the thing on the throne. The room convulsed. The voices screamed. The fog shrieked. The watchers fell as if strings had been cut. And the cathedral of darkness collapsed, not in stone and rubble, but like an idea being erased. They awoke on the road. Dawn. The fog had lifted. The traveler's clothes were damp, but clean. The ring was gone. The knife, gone. The path behind them, to Wraithmoor, overgrown and empty. They turned. There was no village. Only moorland. Only wind. Only silence. But in a house far away, a child found an old journal. And in the margins, scrawled in unfamiliar ink, WRITHMR, 2 miles.